jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show.
Before Janeway and Picard. Before Sisko, Spock, and Kirk. The Star Trek saga began. Enterprise. This fall on UPN.
For centuries, captains have guided their ships by the stars. But he'll be the first to guide one to the stars.
They're called phase pistols. They have two settings, stun and kill. It would be best not to confuse them.
This is where the Star Trek saga begins. Enterprise launches Wednesday, September 26th on UPN. This fall, adventure
Seems like everybody's itching for a first contact.
comes in all shapes
Would you like to meet them?
and sizes.
Thanks, big guy. Hope we don't expect everyone we run into out here to be hostile.
Enterprise, the 2-hour series premiere 1 week from tonight on UPN.
We are not in this alone. None of us are. We're all living in uncertainty. Even for a crew as familiar with it as this one. The stress is taking its toll. But we are not in this alone. None of us are.
5 light years across. That's the size of the gravitational anomaly.
Where's it headed next?
It could go anywhere. And we may not have any kind of warning at all.
Federation, non-federation. This anomaly threatens us equally.
Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together.
Indeed, we are more than allies.
Captain Burnham, make no mistake. You are in charge.
She has faith in me.
We are facing something we don't understand. Something that could tear us all apart. But there's only one way to confront the unknown. Together.
Hello, my name is Ashlyn.
And I'm Rhianna.
And we are two real-life sisters from the Duras Sisters podcast.
We are not Klingons, but we are sisters. Thank you so much to the Jacked Up Review Show podcast for asking us to record this little voicemail for you all. We are a show that talks about Star Trek through themes. Our first theme was about the pilot series, and then we talked family, and then love and affection, time travel, villains, and we are currently on our movie series reviewing all the movies of Star Trek.
Yeah, so Rhianna and I have a crazy history with Star Trek. It has been a part of our lives for as long as we can remember. Our parents got us into Star Trek. After Star Trek 2009 came out, we thought, okay, we just have to watch all of Star Trek in order. So we started with the original series, and then we watched in order of release. Mm-hmm. So we didn't see Enterprise until after we had finished Voyager. And then, we'd already seen TOS and TNG and DS9. Watching Enterprise after all of these very iconic shows was really interesting because Enterprise is a really different show. I mean, they're still on a ship called Enterprise, but there's no transporters and their uniforms are much different. And there's not even a Federation.
Yeah, there's not even Red Alert until Reed makes the Read Alert.
Yeah.
Well, and Ashlyn, I think something important to note too about Enterprise is when we were watching it, you were in college because we finished Voyager like literally the minute before we flew out to take Ashlyn to college in San Francisco. And so then we had to wait until we were on breaks, I believe, to watch Enterprise, and we binged that show so hard. And luckily it's only 4 seasons, it's not nearly the long franchises like
luckily
Next Gen.
Rhianna.
Luckily for our timing.
Yeah.
But not luckily that it got canceled so early. I think that Enterprise was such an experience for me because it was such a different show than any of the other Trek shows I had seen. I remember feeling a little bit disoriented when we started Enterprise because I was so accustomed to like Kirk being the first Enterprise captain and not realizing that Archer was now the first. And I had heard so much bad stuff about Enterprise that when I watched it, I was like, why does everyone hate it so much? It's so enjoyable. There's such amazing storylines. The time travel in it is phenomenal. I just think that like it does not get the love it deserves.
Yeah, Enterprise is commonly left out of a lot of fun discussions about Star Trek. I also really enjoyed Enterprise. I do think I have to be in a certain mood to watch it because it is so much different. I thought that the cast of characters that they have for it worked really well. I have to just applaud the writers for choosing to set a show in this time period because it really fleshes out all of the different plots of each series, because in Voyager, they're stuck in the Delta Quadrant. DS9, they're stationary the whole time in an airport, essentially. And then Enterprise takes place, 100 years before we even know who James T. Kirk is. So I think it really diversifies the Star Trek series, and you can kind of choose, what flavor of Trek do I want this week?
That's such a good point, Ashlyn. And I think, we want to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of Enterprise. And honestly, everyone else seems to think this is a con, but one of the biggest pros for me is the intro. I think it's a banger. I love this song. I know it's like universally hated. A lot of people don't like Faith of the Heart, but I love it. I think it really says a lot about the show, and also it's the only show with like only Star Trek opening with lyrics, which is kind of a fun change. And I love that the visuals, are about sort of the evolution of spaceflight. That is one of the coolest things. It really then gets to center you where we are in the show. What do you think about the intro, Ashlyn?
I'm with you, Rhianna. I really like the intro. I also like to climb on board and hate it too. The thing I don't like is the season 4 fast version. It's been a long road. Oh yeah, it's too fast for me.
I like it. I think it's showing the change in times.
My gosh. Or I think the biggest pro of Enterprise is its introduction of new species that we haven't heard of yet, and it's also its portrayal of old and beloved species like the Andorians. We get a really fleshed out perspective from the Andorian species as well as the Vulcans. We get to see them in a whole new light that we have never seen them before. Introduction of the Xindi and then so many other species. It is really fun to see them in this pre-Federation state. So I think that really is a strength of the show.
Absolutely. And I think as well another strength is that it shows species in a different light than what we're used to, like with the Vulcans. Even though I don't like a lot of Vulcans, and that frustrates me, it also adds this depth that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise, because I'm a huge fan of Vulcan culture. Like, I try to memorize, like, all their rituals, and, like, I'm just really into Vulcans because Spock is my favorite character, Tuvok is one of my favorite characters, T'Pol is probably one of my favorite Enterprise characters, so notoriously I just love Vulcans. And so to see a lot of them portrayed as sort of bigots or just not very open-minded about humans, and also have the humans be very not open-minded about Vulcan culture and be kind of disrespectful to the pole in the beginning. It's such a fun dynamic to play with that creates a lot of tension, but it's good tension, you know? It really helps to add to the meat of the show.
I think I love what you said, and I think the biggest con is that it was too short, and I thought it was really getting good in the last season. And I think that sometimes the writing is a little bit weird, and I don't know, it's just weird sometimes.
Absolutely. I think also one of my biggest cons of Enterprise is just the amount of like how sexual it is sometimes is a little over the top for me. I think that Star Trek in general does definitely talk about like sex and that sort of, you know, relationship dynamics and stuff, but every time they're in the chamber where they have to like rub each other down with gel, I'm like a high schooler when I'm watching this, and I'm just like, I don't really care to see these random characters like get in every little nook and cranny and like get all sexy in the chamber. Like, it was just a weird addition to me that didn't seem necessary. I think for T'Pol and Trip it was necessary, but not for some like random like Hoshi and Reed or whatever.
I don't know. I think it's a way of Star Trek trying to push its boundaries, like how Discovery is doing with adding more swearing in and just trying to, I don't know, add some different type of flavors to Star Trek. Yeah, whether it was successful or not is up to each viewer.
So, Ashlyn, you talked about Discovery as well, and this is, of course, the other prequel show that we have in Star Trek right now. And God, do I love Discovery. I think that I was a little resistant to the fact that it was only going to be on what is now Paramount Plus, but was at the time CBS All Access. I was like, oh no, that's very gatekeepy, you know, that they're just trying to get more money. But of course I'm going to pay for it, and of course I'm going to watch every episode religiously. You know, it's Star Trek. I'm going to pay whatever amount I need to watch it.
Rhianna and I actually each got tattoos on the premiere date of of Discovery, because we thought there would never be a new Star Trek show in our lifetime, which is so
Jokes
funny
on us.
because now there's like 5. So we were so psyched, and this was when both of us were actually living together in college. We both went to school in San Francisco. We had our own place together, and Star Trek Discovery came out. It felt like destiny.
It did, yeah.
I think the biggest resistance I had to it in the beginning was the look of the Klingons, which sounds like, I don't know, it sounds really closed-minded, but I just had a really hard time because I'm such a huge Klingon fan, and watching Worf's development through 2 shows plus movies, I got so obsessed with Klingon culture that watching how different everything was in Discovery, how Kelvinverse the Klingon seemed, was really off-putting to me. And also the fact that there was not a consistent main cast for the entire first season was really hard for me to get used to, because, you know, you think it's going to be one captain, and then they're slaughtered, and then you have another you have another captain, and then they're evil. So it's really off-putting, and even the bridge crew is fluctuating, and Michael herself is having a terrible time in the first season. And so I think that was one of the hardest parts for me. But Discovery has consistently blown my mind in everything that they do, and every season has been so spectacular. And now it's made itself a way that in season 3, it is not even a prequel show anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Ashlyn, you bring up a good point about the sort of disjointedness I felt in the beginning of Discovery, because I remember once Culber got his neck snapped, I was like having a really hard time watching this show, because it was very dark, and it was the first kind of show that wasn't episodic, that was following an overarching seasonal plot. And I was having a really hard time coming to terms with just like the tone of the show, and like you said, just the switching around of the cast of characters, because I loved Georgiou as a captain. First of all, she's like a woman of color. We finally get more Asian representation, especially as a captain lead, is super important, and she's female. Like, all of that was like freaking amazing. And then she's immediately killed and replaced by a white guy. And so I think for me that was really disheartening, and I felt
it's
like
Lucius Malfoy. I'm sorry, Rhianna. I love him so much, but I was like, where does Lucius come from?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's exactly what the show intended, was to isolate us and to make us feel disjointed, because he's coming from a mirror universe. And so when we found that out, everything was rewarded for me. Like that, once we found out that Lorca was evil, I was like, everything makes so much sense. Makes sense why I'm really confused about why I don't really like Lorca, why he's acting so strangely, why everything feels so disjointed. So anyway, I think that was my hardest part of the show, but the pros of this show so outweigh the cons for me.
Endless pros.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about mental health. We get amazing, amazing written arcs and plots. Like, oh my god, the second season arc was just phenomenal. Having to involve Enterprise with Pike, having that and become... Spock. And Spock, are you kidding me? I was like weeping every time he was on screen because I just love Spock in any iteration. The fact that we get Pike and we get more of him is amazing because like Pike is such a character that's so mysterious and enigmatic for people, and to have Anson Mount do just a phenomenal job was amazing. And like you said, now we're at a place where we get to be in a whole new timeline for Discovery, which is absolutely incredible, and something I'm so glad that they did, because while prequel shows are really cool, we were about to run into original series again in the timeline, and there was also no explanation as to why Spock never talked about Michael in the canon, and so they did it perfectly to wrap it up, to have this like you can't talk about it clause, you know, and I think that works so well for then informing how Spock is in the original series, and then informing how Michael and their crew is once they get to the future. And I'm just so happy about how season 4 is going and everything. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I think Discovery was able to slip into the cracks where it's close enough to TOS that viewers are still comfortable, but then the show pushes boundaries in all these different ways that does make other people upset. A lot of Trek bros really don't like Discovery because it's like quote unquote so woke.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of the most groundbreaking and impressive shows in our generation. I feel like when we look back, Discovery is going to be like one of the best Star Trek shows that we have, and I do think it has some of the best acting, like of any show.
Well, and talk about representation. Like I talk about this very openly, but I am a lesbian, and so getting to see queer characters on this show, like trans and non-binary characters, and just having representation that isn't just straight and cis is so amazing, and something I've been waiting for so long in Star Trek. That's the only thing that's been my drawback of Trek all these years, is that there hasn't been any really canonically gay characters until Stamets and Culber, and that's why I was so mad that Culber died, because I'm like, are you seriously killing off the only queer people until Reno came? And of course, then Culber's alive and everyone's happy and fine. But anyway, Trek is amazing, and it's becoming even better, which is I never thought to be possible.
Yeah, I think for me also, seeing an all-female or majority-female bridge crew really changed me. And there was the first episode where that happened, I want to say it's like in the middle of season 2, I seriously just burst into tears because I never thought that we would see Trek with a ship run by females on the bridge. It was
or like an all-female away team. What?
Oh my god,
like, that's
it's
not
so
heard of.
amazing. We know that there is Strange New Worlds coming, and so I'm glad that Discovery, by leaving the past, made room for another prequel show. And I am so excited for Strange New Worlds to come out. I'm literally every day I wake up screaming, thinking about how I get to see Anson Mount on a weekly basis.
Well, yeah, Ashlyn's like in love with Pike and I'm in love with Spock. So together, and we get to have Una finally number 1 gets a name. It's just everything is, the future is so bright with Trek, and I'm just so thrilled to be a part of it. And now let's do our ranking. Let's rank these two shows and how they stand with the rest of the Trek franchise.
Unfortunately for Enterprise, I think that it's not my least favorite Trek show, but it's the one that I enjoy the least. I don't know how to say that without being mean. The bar for Star Trek is so high that Enterprise just had that like many flubs that it puts it at the lower part of the list for me. I like Enterprise more than a lot of other TV shows.
Yeah, Ashlyn, I agree. I think it's probably higher than Prodigy, but only because Prodigy has like 4 episodes and I don't really like the main character of Prodigy currently. Yeah, it's just tricky too because Enterprise didn't get the time it deserved and it got canceled early, similar to TOS. It's still, yeah, it's sort of bottom ranking for me as well, unfortunately.
Yeah. And then Discovery is harder to place because it is such a different show from everything else. And also, I have so many biases from shows that I watched when I was younger. I mean, I have trouble picking my favorite Star Trek show. So
Right, on a good day, yeah, same.
right now, in the moment, TNG is my favorite, followed by DS9, and then Discovery.
Yeah.
Is number 3 for me. Yeah. What about you, Rhianna?
I'm similar. DS9 is always top of my list, and then TOS, and then Discovery. So also in third.
Yeah, I was actually trying to go between TOS. I had like a 3-way tie with TOS, Voyager, and Discovery.
Oh, it's so hard because every time I think about leaving out Voyager, I like cringe a little inside.
I know.
Or think about leaving out Lower Decks as well.
Oh, God. Oh, jeez.
Anyway, but I'm just so happy we got to have this discussion, Ashlyn, and thank you so much for having us on.
Welcome, ladies and gents. Here we are for another action-packed TV show, SmackDown. Here I got with me Dan Leckie, very outspoken Trek fan. You used to work for the Wicca, Memory Alpha, and then I think you said you've been on a bunch of other podcasts.
Yeah, I keep doing podcasts and people interviewing me and stuff. Especially since I've sort of broken a couple of news stories recently.
So we've been on a roll here for this year where we're just tackling all the Trek stuff in much gusto. We did the original series and the animation from the 70s back to back. Then we did the Next Gen era with Picard, and then we did the Next Gen spinoffs, Deep Space Nine and Voyager. And now here we are. We're talking about the 2 Trek prequel shows. Enterprise, which is 100 years before Kirk's time in the original series, and Discovery, which is all kinds of somewhere in between, 10 years or less between Kirk's time, and then kind of improvises from that point. So we're going to just try and figure out the merit of each one, what we like, what we don't like, and where they rank in the saga that is never ending.
Cool.
So what was, where did you come from on the Trek wheel belt? Where did you first just become a huge fan and just follow it from that point on?
Well, the first episode I saw was the Next Generation episode, The Defector, written by Ron Doomer. And basically, started checking out the Next Gen and original series episodes after that.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I saw my first Next Gen episode. We're talking 2000s, and I got into what's the one that first introduced the Borg, and so I was a fan for life. I'd always seen parts of it before, but then I rented all the Trek movies, and then saw so many of the same various shows, and then from that point on, then got to the Next Gen movies. But these were all in the 2000s in very short time. There's just something everyone could watch, and so many different people liked, and I always, at the back of my head, just kind of preferred it more than Star Wars. Don't get me wrong, I was watching Star Wars more, but in many ways, that was just kind of just showing me what I didn't really like about it, because I was watching it more. It's like, Star Wars is fun and all, but it's escapism. And this, I feel like it's more than, Trek is more than escapism. I feel like it's a fun, philosophical, sometimes freaky, just sci-fi adventure. And, so many other sci-fi things just go back to it, and it's like they kind of owe it to it, whether it's something goofy like Red Dwarf or something serious like Babylon 5. Is like, well, yeah, that's pretty much, just so much inspiration right then and there.
Yeah. So do you know if your first episode was Q-Who or the Best of Both Worlds?
It would definitely be Q-Who. Yeah, it was,
right. Cool.
I wasn't there yet to the Picard assimilation, but yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm a fan for life. This is cool, intriguing stuff, great use of visual effects, storytelling, and I liked how sometimes it could be kind of a B-grade plot that might be in something infamous or something more accomplished, like, Forbidden Planet. It could be very unpredictable. And I mean, it was inescapable. I was always watching something on cable TV like TNT or Sci-Fi Channel, and so I, just when we shortly got thereafter to all the various, Stargates and Battlestar Galactica rehashes, like, yeah, I'm a sci-fi fan for life. I like horror, I like action, I like comedy, but sci-fi, if I'm gonna dedicate an ounce to it, it better be more than just superheroes and caves. It better actually be an intriguing just bit of philosophy. And I love how so many shows today are just echoing a lot of that. Another Life, I totally recommend. That's on Netflix. The Expanse is still going strong at 6 seasons, and
I've heard good things about that. But I was thinking probably you're more of a fan of sci-fi in general than I am, because I was thinking like all the genres that you mentioned, like I really, really, really like. And apart from Star Trek, I guess, and maybe Doctor Who, there's not much sci-fi like shows that I really like.
That's a good segue, because that show is kind of like Red Dwarf, where it's just very campy, and I mean, there's plenty of other shows that kind of do that. There's Mr. Science Theater, it's just
yeah, which I only recently heard of, and I keep hoping that it'll turn out well with what I've heard about them doing a series of Galaxy Quest with Simon Pegg involved.
Is that still in development? I thought they put it to the side for now.
Did they? I didn't hear about it.
But what do I know?
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot about it for.
It's funny you brought that up. That was actually like our first of the track reviews. We just like started out with like Galaxy Quest and the Orville. We're like, let's do the track homage shows and see which one ranks well and which one hasn't dated well. And there was a lot of interesting conversation in there. It's like, would this have been better on actual Star Trek, or did it not? Would it not have worked at all?
Yeah, I caught recently the first episode of Cowboy Bebop, I think it's called, so like live action series. And then it turned out very soon afterwards Netflix had already cancelled it after just one season.
Wow.
I thought the first episode looked amazing. Yeah, it's like disappointing how many shows there are that Netflix just like suddenly cancels, I think.
Yeah, they're right now, I think, going to keep losing a lot of net worth if they keep doing that, because I mean, it just tells people don't bother tuning in. You're becoming the next Fox or CBS type show where you just cancel on the fly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so this was just like one of the few sci-fi ventures you ever bothered with. What about track that just stood out to you that just made you say, hey, that I'm in this for life?
I think it was like the very first episode that I saw, The Defector. It was just like, I was like, this is so dramatic. The way that it's acted and written, basically. I was like, this is cool. And I guess like later on as well, like in the ship shots and stuff like that, and yeah, like Wrath of Khan, like thinking like how dramatically that's played by Ricardo Montalban, and how well it's written
from Fantasy Island and the Planet of the Apes films. And it's I don't know about you, I've never had any awful encounters with any fans, whether ones who that's all they watch versus just doing casually. I've always had pretty good experiences, even before some people got in heated arguments about some of the prequel shows or the reboot movies. It's still pretty well laid out, instead of, in my experience, toxic like it's been with plenty of other franchises. Like I've done it with horror fans like Halloween or Hellraiser, to where it's like, you guys need to just get away from the computer. And then same thing with Star Wars. I've just seen people get in just shouting matches to where it's just like, what does it matter? You guys are going to watch these multiple times anyway and love them or bitch about them. It's just And
I keep encountering like toxic fans of Star Trek recently, and I just keep in mind like the saying, like, do not feed the trolls, just like don't interact.
Totally. So I guess you could say, well, I think that's a good segue. So when you heard that they were doing a prequel show and it was still done basically in the same kind of style as like Deep Space Nine or Next Gen, what was your just first reactions before it premiered?
I can't really remember that far back. I can remember after the show started and being frustrated with it, and how little they were developing the other characters apart from like Trip, T'Pol, and Archer, and keeping that triumvirate sort of concept that they'd already had in the original series. I was like, who are these people? Like Reed, Travis Mayweather, and Hoshi Sato. Like, I guess like
You were
Hoshi
sounding
Sato,
like Jerry Seinfeld. Who are these people? Yeah, no, that's a good point. I always had kind of a love-hate relationship, but I'll get to that. And so, yeah, the cast of characters is Captain John Archer, played by Scott Bakula. You know, the famous time travel show Quantum Leap, and later NCIS New Orleans fame. And Vulcan T'Pol, played by Jolene Blaylock. Trip, also known as Tucker, who is the chief engineer. Malcolm Reed, who's the tactical officer. Hoshi Sato, played by Linda Park.
Engineering officer.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. Chief. Well.
Yeah, chief engineer.
Malcolm Reed. He's
Malcolm
like
Reed's the tactical officer.
Yeah, that's what I said. I thought. Okay, but yeah, there's Hoshi, who's played by Linda Park, who's the communications gal. And then we got Travis Mayweather, who's the helmsman, and then Phlox, Dr. Phlox, who's the chief medical officer.
Yep.
So it's been a lot of fun listening to a lot of these GalaxyCon Zoom meetings that are on that chat. Because that's just, they're almost always doing like Trek theme stuff where they're interviewing, like they'll do one where they'll like do a sit down with like all the captains, all the doctors, all the engineers. And they did a historical one with all the doctors, and there's like John Billingsley said we had literally nothing to go on when we signed up. We had to kind of pretty much determine our characters, and we went from there. And I interpreted my character as like a outer space chicken, and the director told me to shut the fuck up and stop doing whatever it was I was doing.
Yeah, I remember him saying that in quite a few interviews. Writing on Memory Alpha for like years, like I really worked on fleshing out the Nobulum page. Was one of them. So yeah, like went through like all the written interviews that John Billingsley had done, basically, just to add background information to the article.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of just one of those where it was it is like you didn't really know what to expect, and the show was just constantly syndicated to where it's like I would just always recognize them in something. And so many of these actors, they've been around for years on all the crime shows, all the sitcoms, and it's really interesting to hear how a bunch of Trek actors like Scott McDonald, Rick Worthy, Randy Oligosby, and Vaughn Armstrong play multiple characters throughout this entire production, especially Vaughn, who's like both the Admiral and just like the go-to for playing Klingon guest stars for.
Yeah, I saw on the webpage someone had worked out like he apparently made as many appearances in different roles as Jeffrey Combs.
I think so. Yeah, it was definitely of that sort. Where
and Jeffrey Combs appears as Shran in Enterprise and was to have been one of the main characters if they'd gone on to a 5th season of the show. But I was thinking just now, I always thought it was quite interesting that Trip Tucker was originally to have been called Spike, but because there was already a Spike on like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they were like, oh, we don't want to copy that name.
Yeah, that's a good point. It definitely was to that area where it was just like, okay, well, I mean, you can go about it this way, but you don't have to. And I'll just say this. So I've said it in the last 2 reviews. Out of all the track producers, I'm not a fan of Rick Berman. I'm not. I read the 50-Year Journey, and I saw how he was just very nosy and just taking too much credit for everything and kind of working the writers to death. And
well, actually, yeah, it was quite interesting you say that, because that's sort of like what I've always thought about Gene Roddenberry, just taking credit for everything. Like he would, like, specifically was wanting to be known as the creator of Star Trek, and people, I'm pretty sure, like when you read like Inside Star Trek, the real story that Robert Justman wrote with Herb Solo, and they're like, well, you know, it was a group effort. And Gene didn't totally create the show because it requires so many people to actually create a show.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, all the other guest writers who would, you know, on both the original and next gen, who would either take their name down because, you know, first it was just they didn't like what Roddenberry made changes to on original, and then on next gen, you know, he was suffering from dementia according to the 50-year journey book, which had a bunch of interviews, and his lawyer decided to get a big head and say, hey, I want to be a writer, but was like, well, you're not a good writer, and the quality is going to suffer if you keep doing this, so we're just going to take our names off it and use this to launch our careers. But yeah, no, totally what you said. Like Roddenberry was long gone by this point, but he was just always just saying, like, the only guy he let win all his arguments was Ira Steven Barr on Deep Space Nine. Ira was just like, if we stay idle, this is going to be a static show in both terms of quality, and it's just not going to bring anything new to the franchise. We are wagon train in space. You know, we got to explore the frontier. We got to leave the station. And he would let him have it because Ira just knew how to be very calm, patient, and just pretty much show Berman what an idiot he was. But yeah, when he got to Voyager, he pretty much just let Braga and Jerry Taylor do whatever they wanted. And Braga has just admitted in several interviews, like, by this point, no ideas were coming to fruition. And so he's like, well, I'm going to try and do what I got to do. But he's like, yeah, I think most people just stopped watching by episode 3 of season 1. And later on, that's a good segue here. Manny Koto, who many know from later seasons of 24 and Dexter and cult movies like Star Kid and Dr. Giggles, he was the head writer that they brought on for season 3 and 4. So,
well, not season 3, but season 4.
Yeah, sorry, he was just one of the writers on season 3, and then by 4
wrote Similitude.
Oh, it was some good writing, and that's why I always meant to go back to the show over the years. I was just like, so I liked but didn't love Deep Space Nine. Don't worry, I warmed up. I was always one of those. Even now, I just felt it, like, first 3 seasons were acceptable, and then by season 4, that's when it changed the game. When Warp joined the cast and the storylines started getting more, you know, serialized. And same thing with Voyager, is like I had a love-hate relationship with it. I still are many seasons that aren't very good, but there's still a lot of good episodes in there. And I was kind of on the same boathouse as this. Is like, I love this cast. I like these characters. I like the style, how they're like looking like a mix between, like, you know, what an early military and NASA type, you know, space fleet would look like. And I would always hear, oh, the last 2 seasons are way better. And I was like, I would marathon this at work in the last 5 years. And I was like, you know what? They're on the money. Why did you give it the time of day at this point?
Well, I guess, like, in the whole lead up to that, because when did that start? Like 2001. Like, I was had been a Star Trek fan all up to it, and was really interested, basically, in where they took it, even if there were some niggles or frustrations or whatever as it went on. But I think one of those, I guess, was, like, talking about Berman, was how much, like, Berman and Braga basically would write for the show, or insisted on writing for the show. And I was thinking just now, like, there was clearly, like, a difference between, like, what Roddenberry did and, like, the original series, or what he did, I guess, in any series that I've heard about.
Yeah, you saw what they're going for, but it just wasn't always successful.
Not having his name particularly credited in the episodes, but still doing a lot of rewriting, because, like, the excuse that he would give would be, like, he wanted the series to have, like, he was, you know, he aim for a particular tone in the show. Like, that's why he wanted to, like, keep the scripts sort of consistent. So I thought that was a better approach that Roddenberry took, where he would rewrite a bit but still keep, like, the original writers' names on the episodes, than, like, what Berman and Braga did, which is, you know, just themselves, Right, like every single episode, or nearly every single episode.
Or even J. Michael Straczynski on Babylon 5 is like, you don't have to do every episode unless you know it inside and out and you got the time. And Straczynski was, I think the difference between him and, like you say, some of these track guys who just kept rewriting everything and just giving the original scribes credit is like, Straczynski knew what he wanted and he just decided, is like, I'm going to just reevaluate this. I'm going to, be on set all day, supervising, making sure the directors who are also from Trek are getting my vision down, and then I'm going to go home and write. And it helped that he had a blueprint. He did have a 5-year map in route, and I think that's just it. They didn't outline this. They just rushed into production because Berman didn't want to lose the Trek contract. And honestly, this was just really bad. It's like, he's just, when you see him in the interview, he's so, as we've talked before about the movies, he was so oblivious to why, like, Nemesis flopped at the box office, both critically and with fans. And it's like, you oversaturated the franchise, dude. Like, you got Voyager had just barely, ended, and Enterprise is already premiering. And then you got this coming out the same year as all the other blockbuster movies like The Ring, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. This is like, and he just thought it was a failsafe, like no one could take it down. It's like, well, after a while, stories got to end, and you got to let a franchise breathe after a while, and I think that's just it. He didn't want it to breathe.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't really buy that. And actually, like, Nemesis is one of my favorite films ever. Yeah,
have fun with some of it. It's just a matter of whether you like, just like how it progresses. Like, I don't like some of the overacting, but it's still a fun action movie. I feel like it's like the Data stuff is more interesting than all the Picard clone stuff. That's if you get my meaning. But every Trek movie is worth watching. That is for sure. So it seems like, I don't know, he just got very bogged down by, he wasn't liking the reactions he was seeing and yet acting like people were being weird and everything. It's like, no, there's pros and cons of everything. Just make a few changes. And I think,
I think it got like sort of stale or whatever to an extent. Because I was thinking, like, they should bring in, make, like you say, like, make a few changes, which I guess they eventually tried to do with, like, bringing in the Zindian and then, like, changing to the so that Manny Koto was the showrunner in season 4, and
he was still relatively well known, and it helped that there were many actors who had like multiple roles. Like Jeffrey Combs is a recurring anti-hero on here, which is a fun contrast to his villain on Deep Space Nine. So it's like, it kind of did get to that point where it's just like you say, I mean, nothing is too big to fail. Everything needs to take a break once in a while. And I guess you could say, Voyager was kind of just like coasting on just, kind of the Lost in Space formula and just more Borg battles. And this, you see Berman quoted as saying he envisioned this as a mix between astronaut Chuck Yeager and Han Solo. And I'm like, I never got that just at all. Like, Bakula had definitely done a lot of Harrison Ford type kind of roles, I guess you could say, for small screen TV. But I mean, this character, especially when he gets to season 3 and becomes kind of a Jack Bauer on 24 kind of badass, he's kind of more of just a reserved kind of, he's kind of just echoing just what all the captains do on this show, especially in their first year, where they're very, quiet and observant,
Well, I was thinking about how, like, Gene Roddenberry developed, like, Star Trek in general, and like, I really don't think that he, like, developed the original series thinking they were, like, perfect people or perfect humans or whatever. I think it was only, like, later that he'd go onto, like, college campuses and stuff and give speeches, and then got, into the idea, there's so many fans enjoying this show, and, like, maybe even, like, he started to hero worship the characters himself and think, oh, these are needs to be depicted as perfect, to sort of as it he then went on to do in like the Next Generation, and you know, like the writers of that show would get like really sort of frustrated. They
Well, Roddenberry
couldn't
was a
have
progressive
conflict.
guy. He still had occasionally just a lot of eye candy characters on the show, and I think Berman was paying too much attention to that. He wasn't actually listening to like the philosophy and other shit. And I mean, pretty much his backup was like, what would Gene do? And it's like, first off, you got to understand his style, you know, Roddenberry's style, and then, you know, using him as an excuse for I don't approve of that idea was kind of lame. It was kind of like if you were to come up to me right now and just say, well, that critic doesn't approve of that movie, so I can't give it a good review. No, dude, just think for yourself, you know?
Well, I'm thinking just now, like, clearly, like, Berman was only familiar with the Roddenberry of later years as work, because they started working together on the Next Generation.
He was just a executive for programming at Paramount, and he hired Michael Piller, who was helming his hit show Simon and Simon. And by this point, you know, Piller wasn't involved with the franchise anymore. He was on to other endeavors after he did the movie Insurrection. So it's like you got just the leftover guys, and Ronald D. Moore has already left. He's done all the great Klingon episodes. He's doing this little thing called the Battlestar Galactica rehash. And it's just one of those where it's just like, it's not a fully well nurtured production. You got the same, it shows how you can still have inconsistent quality even when you got the same makeup, effects artists, directors, producers returning. And it's like, well, you still got to nourish the beast, which is the essence, which is the plot, and brainstorm. And I know many track directors, especially when they first start out during the 90s, you know, people forget. There's this thing called film, you know. Season 4 is the only one that like adapted to digital, and like, because that became a thing around 2004 as saving money and both enhancing quality. And they never knew what an episode was going to look like until, you know, like the editing room. You know, you just had to look at certain shots and everything. And, you know, at this point, they're pretty much just like, okay, so obviously we're going to do a lot of things that just aren't going to match up or look like the original series, but we're going to at least still have just kind of the slow opening doors with the classic sound effect, you know, and we're going to show how they got a lot of stuff that isn't there yet. They don't have the multiple languages, interpretations. They don't have, you know, that's why they got Hoshi here. And I do love that actress. She was recently on the show Bosch, and she's been on all other kinds of movies and shows, but it's like, I would always make out these various actors on this show, because like they would just go into so many unusual roles. And I think so. I'll let you step in. How do you think they fare with just interpreting these roles? Did they make it their own, or are they only as good as the scripts when they come in?
Well, I thought it was really well acted, actually. I guess in general.
Especially Trip.
I think it was more to do with like fleshing out the characters, and you know, I was thinking just now, like Travis, you'd get like one episode, maybe if you're lucky, a season where he returns to his family in the horizon or whatever, on, you know, the freighter. I'm like, you can surely flesh out the characters a bit more than this,
right?
Found that
I always felt like they were getting held back, and I never knew if it was just. And I've heard that. Again, Bakula is just one of the most giving actors. Never complains, never argues with directors. He's always like, he'll suggest something. How about I do this and that? And if you don't want to take it, he's like, okay, cool. We're going to just do it however the game plan is already set up. But I would always just, when watching this, I would just always feel like, I just feel like I'm missing something. Like, do I need to watch more episodes, or is they just not fully realizing this concept? Is it, you know, a decent script, but they're just something's still not landing. And I can safely say there are some interesting episodes in the first 2 seasons. I do feel, again, like others have echoed, season 3 and 4, it just totally changes up the whole ballpark. They just raise the stakes. There's like you really don't even need to know anything about the first 2 seasons. Like some of the episodes on season 2, like, so basically, much like how the Borg are always kind of watching them, they kind of do have a similar kind of Q entity, kind of like on Next Gen. There's these men in black who are multi like universe time travelers, and they basically are just always overwatching them, giving hints. And they did intend, the creators, to kind of channel a bunch of X-Files kind of things, which is fine, because I mean, the original shows were always kind of very Twilight Zone-esque, and I did dig how it's like basically that was as badass as Captain Archer got, where he was just like, okay, I'll play your little mind game and I'll try and overthink you. It's like, well, finally, now we're getting inside the character instead of, just react to a screen and say, engage, fire,
So I was wondering, well, presumably you're referring to like Daniels and Future Guy and the Temporal Cold Wars and stuff like that.
Yeah. Sorry,
I wondered, because there's been like several stories about who Future Guy may have been, like whether it may have been like a Romulan or Archer himself. Like, what do you think would have been like the best to go with?
That's a good question, because I don't even feel like I know, like the people who crafted him know who he truly is. They kept it open in case they wanted to build on it, but they kind of let it go to the side. They didn't really deal with it anymore after season 3. So I think I kind of got a Invasion of the Body Snatchers vibe from him, if that makes sense. Like he's whoever whatever body he's taken over or identity he's assumed, that's who he is. You know what I mean?
Interesting concept. It's cool.
But no, that's a good point, because he really is a very dangerous dude. Never, even though he's not even doing anything threatening everything, you're just always just kind of very just intimidated by him.
Mm-hmm. And I guess like I got a bit frustrated at the plots on Voyager because as I sort of later realized, I think like it had already begun in Voyager. I think like quite a few of the storylines were like starting to repeat themselves. I noticed quite a bit of similarity from some of the Voyager storylines to like what they'd already done on TNG and stuff like that.
Especially season 1. Like there are so many leftover original series, Next Gen, and Deep Space Nine and Voyager episodes, especially. And you don't know if it's that they basically were running out of ideas, but at the same time, to their credit, it seemed like they were just like, well, this is where Trek is often good, so let's just do something like that. Let's have someone who we got to rescue from a disastrous planet who doesn't want to leave due to their religion or beliefs or whatever, or let's do another just Die Hard in space. I especially dug the Vulcans kind of under a disease who were kind of acting like zombies. That was pretty edgy, but I mean, and then they got an answer for that later on. They're like, did you intend to kill these guys? It's like, well, yes and no. We just had to blow up the ship and they were trying to kill us.
But I think with like the first 2 seasons of Enterprise, I can remember getting like irritated about how much they did like the storyline of there were characters that would get captured and like dealing with that, basically.
You'd like how it began, but then you would hate how it would end, and vice versa. It's like, well, it's taken a while to get into, but that plot twist was pretty good, but still, I mean, you could have 100%, Instead,
I was thinking I think they had a similar thing going on with like Doctor Who, where they do so many of the storylines were like based on just Under Siege stories, famously.
Totally, just so many. I always kind of referred to a lot of them as like, this is Dog Day Afternoon in space. It's just like, especially when you get to, I mean, by this point, like, I think after First Contact was such a hit, they just couldn't help themselves. It's like, we got to have some kind of aliens or the Thing kind of storyline where, yeah, something is berating the officers or causing them to act weird, and then let's throw in a Twilight Zone type of alternate universe. They didn't do as much alternate universe stuff. It was almost always like once a season. For the most part, they pretty much just stuck to their guns of, like you say, is like, let's go after these Zindi and Andorians who, have been hinted at in the other ones, but not underused. Let's show what they were like beforehand. And I got to say, while it was hard to keep track of, I do think it got very better as it went on. It's just, but
yeah, me too.
They didn't repeat the episodes all that much. So if you missed one, you were lost. You were very lost.
Okay, yeah. I think when, as you were saying, when they expanded the storyline, with season 3 being a complete story arc to do with the Zindi and stuff and the Sphere Builders, and then season 2 being shorter story arcs, I thought both ideas worked pretty well. And I was thinking just now, I think when they did alternate universe stories Stormfront, Animated Darkly, and stuff like that, I thought they were quite effective as well.
Oh, totally. Especially the guest stars and, like you say, the outcomes, and just by this point, the characters are just so fully evolved. You don't feel like DePaul, is just another Spock clone at this point. You do feel like she is a gal who's realizing her emotional invaluability to the crew, regardless of how it's against her, beliefs and culture. And then, like you say, Trip is getting more to do as just the chief engineer. And it's so cool just sometimes even seeing him go down to the planet with, Reed, and especially when Starfleet is very unimpressed with their progress and they give them all those outer space Marines. And that's Manny Coto Manny Coto remarked how by season 3 the show was basically becoming Crimson Tide in space, where you got all the steady cam and everyone just kind of at each other's throat, planning a mutiny. And I thought they did that way better than on Voyager. On Voyager, it would often go a few episodes too long, or it would kind of come and go, and you're like, I kind of want a little more, And this I thought was just perfect, because they perfectly casted all the actors who were playing the Marines, and showing how even though they had armor and everything, they just weren't equipped at all for the terrors and utter danger that they had yet to figure out. And like you say, it was good at just showing the ship itself was evolving, how they attempt to do a repair in space. And it kind of got behind the science of it, as opposed to just kind of keeping it vague. We're, half the ship that Kirk is, it's stop doing that. That's detrimental to yourself, stand out in your own way, be your own special dude,
Yeah. I thought they depicted the Romulans well, where, in Balance of Terror, it said no one actually saw a Romulan or whatever. It's, that's established, and indeed in Enterprise, no one actually sees a Romulan. They're just there.
Yeah,
but
Gary Graham.
That said, I think Balance of Terror establishes there were more nuclear weapons involved at that sort of time.
It was interesting seeing them experiment with that. It's they don't have all the photon torpedoes. They only have phasers, and they're basically doing the equivalent of outer space nukes. And it was, like you say, it was kind of cool just seeing is we actually get the Romulans a little better detailed, even a little slightly more so than on Next Gen, especially with the and Gary Graham was really good as the Vulcan chairman or ambassador guy. Just when he comes in, and especially when he gets captured on that one mission and he's having to be interrogated, it's you can't break me. Ow, okay, maybe I'll break. So that there, if you just want to just skip for the first 2 seasons and then come back to them later when you got for season 3 and 4, totally do it, guys. It's aged way better. I actually think it's more successful than other prequels to other franchises in many ways, especially Star Wars, because you get what they're going for. And it is kind of funny how Seth MacFarlane, who later creates the Orville as a homage to this, is a crewman for 2 or 3 episodes on this. It's just a cameo they did. I think you could say UPN kind of screwed up the schedule, because it's they basically they were like, let's just do our sci-fi hour. And it's like, that's kind of too much sci-fi. It's like people are paying attention to Buffy, and I don't know anyone who was really religiously watching Roswell. It was like, well, by that point, I guess people were just kind of word of mouth. It's like, should I check this out? If not, I'll just watch a rerun of Track for the billionth time. Just because they just wouldn't repeat the episodes all that much. And I will, to his credit, I will give John Shaban, who had worked on X-Files, pretty good job on season 2. He basically added to the mysterious intrigue that would be on later. Chris Black was also one of the few writers they kept on who had done all other kinds of silly sci-fi shows, and I think he left by like season 3 or 4, and I think he's just politely said in his mind, is like, what I contributed, that's all I contributed. You know, story ends in my mind after that. Like, well, I think you should see the other episodes. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool they hired the Reeves Stevens for season 4.
Yeah, the other writers who had done all various spin-off novels and also created the show Primeval New World, and so yeah,
and wrote the Art of Star Trek book and stuff like that. As well.
Pretty key stuff, and having them heavily involved was just kind of a blessing to them. They really enjoyed it. They're like, we actually get to get out and get involved. So yeah, no, I mean, so where do you rank these with the rest of the show?
Rank these?
Yeah, so like I'm
Lieutenant.
Yeah, Lieutenant, Admiral, Captain, Commander. So like, okay, so I'll go first. I'm gonna rank, obviously I'm biased, Next Gen first, followed by a tie between the original and Deep Space Nine, and then followed by this.
Cool. I love them all.
Oh well, and so basically, yeah, Discovery comes after this, and then Voyager's last.
We're all captains in my mind.
No, that's fine. And in all fairness, if I want to get really technical, I could just add all the web series and fan made stuff, and then it'll get really trivial.
I was remembering when you were speaking about the like prequel aspect of Enterprise. I remember like reading how DC Fontana was like, but the original series doesn't require a prequel. It was fine as it started. And that was her take on it, or the Enterprise. I mean.
Yeah, I think it helped that a lot of these guys were kind of taking a lot of those. They weren't busy putting in too many Easter eggs, but they were clearly very inspired by a bunch of other kind of cult sci-fi kind of shows. And
so was Next Gen. Like I remember reading how it's like when they were conceiving the character of Tasha Yar, like they would take influence from Aliens or films like that.
Oh, they totally did. And the creatures of the month were just had kind of a 50s kind of monster look. And so long story short, with how it ends, where you later see it for the viewpoints of the Next Gen guys looking in the holodeck. That's controversial to some track fans. I know Scott Bakula off the record talked to someone else, and he's like, I didn't really dig how they kind of made it their show when it's been my show.
I think a lot of folk were like that. Like even Jonathan Frakes, who's one of the Next Gen guys, as you call him. Yeah,
he participated in the episode. He's like, we don't have to do this. I find it interesting, but I'm okay with that. I dig how it's also kind of a very tragic sacrifice episode, but I know others just hated that. They're like, no, it's too sad. Don't do that.
Well, like soon after that, like I overheard someone speaking in Forbidden Planet, like comic store, and they were saying, like they'd seen the final episode and somehow gotten a mistaken impression that the entire show was supposed to be just like a hollow simulation.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's not the case.
It's not the case. They're looking at it years later through history, but yeah, it is one of those, like, you come in the middle of the episode, you will start saying, wait. You know, are they interactive holograms like the Doctor on Voyager? No, it's like they're all one entity, and they're just looking at ancient history years later in the holodeck.
Yeah, I thought that episode was really quite cool. There's some like aspects like I thought were really not very not very cool. Like Riker pausing the hologram to give T'Pol a kiss on the cheek or something. I thought it was a bit creepy sort of thing.
Yeah, there's plenty of a sleaze factor, but I'm like, yeah, at this point, he's not that far away from Harry and Troy, so what the fuck, dude? But yeah, this is like, then like it does kind of take away from some of the action, and I don't even know why he bothers firing in the simulation when he knows it's all fake. So it's like, okay, but I know what you mean. It's on. These last two seasons are very well done, especially just Star Trek, if anything, unlike Star Wars, in my opinion, like they in Babylon 5 and even to some extent Battlestar Galactica, they did space politics so damn well without making it be preachy or poorly done, and just showing how everyone has to give each, you know, race a chunk of the pie. It's like, okay, we'll let you have this planet, but we need you to help us, you know, thwart all these time traveling, you know, disruptors or all these other Xindi guys who have other plans to attack, you know, the Klingons and the Romulans. And it is really a shame that they didn't get a chance to do season 5, but it ends on a pretty satisfying note for season 4, I gotta say. And what's your take on the Suong origin story? How he's kind of messing around with Khan's people, you know?
Oh yeah, I thought it was cool that Brent Spiner managed to make a guest appearance on it, and I was also thinking I thought it was cool, like in the
he's like
in the second season, there's like the episode Future Tense, I think it's called, and there's like the Tholians and that. I thought it was cool.
There was a lot of that, and I mean, even that lesser episode with Clancy Brown guest starring, he kind of gave me a cross between like the kind of natives who would have been part of Khan's people, or even in Star Trek 5. But it's like, this one, like Brent Spiner was just having a blast and showing that. I mean, he's even shown it obviously in Picard, and back when he played the later Suong scientists who create the android Data, he was really good at just showing how this guy really was just an outspoken scientist who had no shame, you know, about various mad experiments. And I always just liked how he kind of always gave it kind of a Dr. Frankenstein, but a gentle kind of feel. And then he would just be very playful later on and sneak in the manipulation. You're like, okay, I see where you're going with this. And good casting on Alec Newman from Children of Dune. And, you know, the Dune miniseries shows as one of the Khan type individuals who's just like very ruthless.
Also the old ones. But regarding, I've been thinking about like Brent Spiner's acting. Like he must have played like so many different characters, and I was thinking that's just, you know, just amazing. I think
even
like,
lore, you know.
Well, not only that, but I was like watching Nemesis the other day, and there's a scene where he has to act Data pretending to be B4 as well as B4 and Data. I'm like, how can you?
It helps that he has a comedy background, but it also kind of I mean, he started out in Night Court before he got big on this, but that's a good point. Any other actor would have just kind of you know, influctuated how they speak, or be just kind of just schizo, just very silly and over the top, and he instead just decides to, you know, make one reserved and one more just kind of curious, you know, than the other. And is like, I mean, he conceived the part of the story for that one, so I'm sure every actor does more than just recite the lines and look at how they emote in the mirror. That it's just kind of a discovery through acting, and it's not just their training, because I mean, just like any teacher or trainer, you don't have to take all their advice. You know, you just take it for granted. But I think, like you say, he did a good job of, out of all these characters, including all of just the various alternate universe personas and everything, he's like, I'm going to make this guy be pretty much, you know, where Suong was just mad and just cynical and old and, you know, created lore and Data. This guy is just more, he's just the most brilliant out of all of them. And I mean, it's so funny how there's that other Suwong individual who's now on Picard, and you know, he has like zero ethics. He is all for, you know, everyone killing each other. He's kind of more of a Westworld kind of villain, and so it's just, he pretty much had an idea in mind, is like where he was going to go with it. I definitely felt, and I'm sorry, the whole bringing Captain Kirk on would not have worked. They wanted to originally get William Shatner on to be like, I don't know, I can't remember. Was he like supposed to be like Kirk in like an alternate universe, or like a
in the mirror universe?
Oh, a mirror universe. Okay, so he would have probably been an older. Is like, but it was one of those. Is like you didn't know if he was supposed to be younger or older, because like Shatner was very older by that point, and so. But yeah, they passed on it because he was just expensive at that point. You know, there's this little award-winning show called Boston Legal on at that time. So. Yeah, no.
Regarding like the final episode of Enterprise, like I really like the episode, and there seems to be like the thing where fans will say like, why did they need to kill off Trip? And I'm always like, well, they didn't technically kill off Trip, because who dies there is the holographic Trip, not the actual Trip.
Yeah, but then they had the, I know what you mean, but I thought it was just heroic. I dug it, and by that point you had really just gotten to love the character, because he was, again, you know, in the first few seasons they're all kind of being very mildly playful with each other, but they don't have much to work with at that point except just stomp around in uniforms. And you know, when they get midway through season 2, and then by season 3 and 4, they pretty much have embraced the roles. And so yeah, they're so used to having to repair the ship but work with very little. And to their credit, I mean, I do love how, you know, they take a while to use the transporter. They can't use it all that much. For when they start out, all they can do is basically either attack, travel, or use the shuttle. It's like no beaming until like midway through like season 3. You know?
Yeah,
they've conjured it up.
There is in like episode Strange New Worlds, for example, but it goes like awfully wrong with like Lee's beaming up with the guy that kills him and stuff like that. So the transporter doesn't properly work.
You gotta have a transporter disruption episode and it forming a new entity. And it's so wild how the Trek writers before have talked about, you know, they talk about so many just very awful things in society, let alone controversial aspects like weaponized cultures, and having to take a life is basically an abortion in this. And then it's like with all these other places is like that, you know, Captain Kirk is so used to seeing all these various kingdoms and kind of elitist societies on these planets, but it's like here we're seeing just like the very small portion of it where there's a bunch of hostile smugglers and slave girls, and it's like, jeez, this is these are not very kind communities.
Do you know when this podcast will go out?
Oh, I'm hoping to drop it probably within March, hopefully soon. So
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was thinking of something very current, but yeah, never mind.
Oh, you can. I mean, if you want. I mean.
Well, I thought it was like so cool to read earlier today that the Callie from the Enterprise episode Civilization, which was the first season Enterprise episode, will actually be in like this week's Discovery episode, returning like after, you know, centuries from when they were last seen.
Oh, sweet.
In the, you know, in universe. I thought it was a pretty cool idea. And yeah, the Enterprise still has a legacy, clearly.
Totally. Yeah, to their fairness, I mean, I do like how they kind of went their own route. Like, they kind of struggled at first because they were kind of just having other characters from the other shows just pop up, like discovering the frozen Borg and trying to stop them from, you know, invading in outer space.
Cochrane and the pilot and stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Ranky.
That's cool that they're kind of just building on some of this a bit.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a good segue. So lo and behold, Discovery premiered around 2017. It's now just entered its fourth season as we are speaking. The first episode, as a preview, premiered on CBS, and the rest of it could only be witnessed on CBS All Access, now known as Paramount Plus. So it was a streaming-only show, and lo and behold, people complained because it was apparently too woke or too progressive. Come on, people. Star Trek was always a progressive show. So we're pretty cool, laid-back podcast. So in all fairness, we'll just simply talk about, is it preachy? Are the stories well done? Because that's the real basis of any Trek shows. Does it have good ideas or focus its energy well? So
I had like two thoughts, sort of contrasting Enterprise with Discovery. The first sort of being like Enterprise, like clearly had like basically, you know, the seasons were basically the same number, roughly the same number of episodes from Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise, like 22, 26, something like that. And like I was still getting the impression that even with that number of episodes per season, like feeling like I didn't really get to see or know, I should say, like all the main characters sort of thing. Even more so, I would say, with Discovery, and that's got like fewer episodes per season, with maybe like 10 to 13 episodes. Also, like the Klingons, a lot of people like complain how they changed the look of the Klingons in Discovery. And I've always said, like, well, the last time you see the Klingons chronologically prior to that is in the fourth season of Enterprise, with Antak saying, like, I think it's either him or Archer that's speculating, well, maybe the cranial reconstruction for Klingons may become more popular in the Klingon Empire. So yeah, to me, it like made sense that like the look of the Klingons would change after they'd spoken about that.
Yeah, people made such a fuss about it. I wasn't keen on the thing, but I just also realized it's like, well, I feel like so many people, when they watch a movie or sequel especially, they assume that everything must look the same, and then they complain when something new isn't done with something, and it's just like, you know, it's like, yeah, no, that's everyone's going in their own direction with something, and you got to understand where they're coming from. Yeah, they're establishing early track. So I wasn't sold on the trailers, but you know, I generally don't like trailers. So I was like, okay, I'll check it out reluctantly. And I was also kind of just hit and miss on the reboot movies, the Calvin storyline, you know, that J.J. Abrams and the Fast and Furious guy had conjured up. And I was just like, okay, well, this looks, you know, I went for season one when I had someone else's account, and pretty much I was cool with it. And then midway through season two, it kind of lost me. But while there were some, it was also fun seeing a lot of Battlestar Galactica people pop up here and there. And at times it definitely felt like that, where, you know, everyone's under siege, there's a mutiny. But the difference with that one is, you know, you had to really try and keep up and sometimes look at the recaps, because, you know, it's like they're constantly traveling through the mirror universes, so it's a lot to take in. But you can't, to its credit, you do kind of just go with it, as opposed to just constantly asking questions, saying I'm lost,
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, I think basically they've returned to doing what Enterprise did in the third season, like, i.e., a season-long story arc.
That's good. So why do you feel like many couldn't get into it right away? Just reject. Was it just...
Sorry, what?
Well, why do you think a lot of people just did not give it a fair chance at first?
Well, it seems like every Star Trek show that started up, like, people initially had problems. Like, when the Next Generation started up, not only were fans complaining, but, like, the actors from the original series were saying, oh, this isn't Trek, and, you know, they didn't like it either. Same thing, of course, famously with Deep Space Nine, like people saying, "Oh, it doesn't go anywhere. It's no longer boldly going. This isn't Star Trek."
That's fair.
Quite traditional.
Oh, totally. It's so wild how Ginny Lumet, that's right, the great filmmaker Sidney Lumet's filmmaker daughter and actress, is co-creator of the upcoming spinoff Strange New Worlds. So they got like free spinoffs coming out of this one.
Cool. Yeah.
And I'm a bigger fan of Picard. I know some people didn't care for that one. I thought that was the best out of all the continuations of popular shows and rank it up there with The Mandalorian. But I mean, yeah, this one, Discovery is kind of more about just showcasing, aside from just all these mirror universe travels, just pretty much you get to see a lot of other people who are a key part of history just shadow over each other and show how one person can become an icon in some aspect and another not so much. And like here they're showcasing Captain Pike and how he's just up and coming.
Well, yeah, they've had Pike, Una, number one, Spock.
Yeah, played by Gregory Peck's grandson, Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
So
and
that was good
number
casting
one,
there. What's your take on the portrayal of Sarek by James Frain?
Yeah, I like Sarek, but I was going to say number one finally got like the name Una, which been known as that in novels for like years. But people are complaining like somehow like people are complaining like Strange New Worlds will give her the first name Una. And I was like, well, she's been known as that and named after Una McCormack, the novelist, for years beforehand. So it's not a new thing. But,
yeah, no, it's that was a fun, kind of amusing, just second guessing. You're like, no, this is how it is. But yeah, they got a bunch of other huge actors on here, which is very intriguing. And I know Oded Farr from The Mummy joins later on, and then
yeah, because they'd make like a massive time jump. We should probably say for your listeners between like seasons 2 and 3.
Yeah. So I don't really have any issues with this. I definitely prefer these over the reboot movies because it's just way more engaging escapism. Who would have guessed that Doug Jones from all those Del Toro movies and other creature features is the alien?
I think he's great.
Officer. Yeah, he's able to act through all that thick makeup.
Great.
So I guess some people are complaining about Sania Green, who you guys might have seen on other stuff like Walking Dead, New Girl, Once Upon a Time, and Space Jam 2. She'd already done a bunch of low budget, not very good sci-fi, but at least she just felt so comfortable in this role as kind of just, and for once, this is a good point. This is like the first time you have a protagonist on a track show who isn't a captain. It's not a requirement, the best heroes don't have to have military experience,
Well, I think not a captain in the first 2 seasons at least.
Yeah, no, now she's becoming a captain, but like when it started out, it was like, so I would say the show is really increasing, even if you weren't intrigued by the first season. You should just keep giving it a go. Just keep checking it out, because I think it's going to keep improving and getting better, especially.
Yeah.
So
also, like, I think it's actually to its credit that she isn't a captain at first, but then she becomes a captain, because I was thinking like that's sort of similar to like Sisko was the commander in like the initial seasons of Deep Space Nine, and it was only later, similarly, that he was got the rank of captain. I think it's really interesting seeing like Berman. No, what am I talking about? Michael Berman. What's her name?
Bourbon. Yeah, everyone's drunk in space. I know what you mean. Burnham. Yeah, the actress.
her sort of development and evolution from basically being a convict even to the rank of captain.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, just showcasing how they're having to experiment with so much different science and everything, and people were just freaking out about it. It was kind of rated R, and it's like, why is this a problem? I mean, Trek has always kind of been aimed more at adults, and it's just a very mild, mature rating. Like, they used one F word, and there was a sex scene, but it wasn't graphic. It was not hardcore porn, and it's just so annoying how everyone freaked out about the difference in content. But
yeah, for years Star Trek's included profanity and stuff like double damn ass on you. Hello, that exists in Trek canon.
Yeah, I mean,
decades.
You get to any of the movies, and Bones or Picard always lets out like a goddamn or something. So it's
exactly.
It seems like, I don't know, it just goes over people's heads, and they just want to complain. They want to bitch.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like how they kind of get more and more complex, but the payoff is still way better. Saru, how he's kind of like an implanted spy at first, and then he has to kind of redeem himself, was an interesting character. Not Saru, Vogue, Ash Taylor.
Oh yeah,
the albino Klingon. Is like, that was interesting how, you know, he was a Klingon at first, and then he became a human, and then he has to choose loyalty, and he compares his character to the Hulk.
Yeah,
definitely would give it more of a Dr. Jekyll.
I think it's cool how they've like included Linus as Saurian in the cast, and like Saurians have been seen like ever since like the motion picture, but I don't think like you're never seen as regularly recurring characters Linus. So I thought that was cool. Like they're sort of subtly flashing out that species a bit as well.
Oh, totally. And then you got Anson Mount. You know, he's been on just everything: Hell on Wheels, Law and Order, and movies like Safe with Jason Statham and Nonstop with Liam Neeson. Is like, he's a go-to for just playing anything, an anti-hero, a villain. And here in this, you know, is like, yeah, he pretty much has it down to a T with just the whole just authority figure. So I guess my main issue is they give the protagonist Burnham kind of takes a while to just kind of be given the floor. But so for a while, the show just kind of starts off as kind of a more just kind of an all-star ensemble. I mean, Trek was always an ensemble, but it's more heavily ensemble based before everyone kind of gets their me time. If you guys just aren't digging the Mirror Universe, again, like I've said with every show before, if you don't like season 1, skip ahead another season. If you don't like that one, skip another season, and then come back to all the other stuff. And then, you know, if you just don't dig it, then you don't dig it. But try and, you know, just like with anything, check it out yourself. Do not do the whole, what is very popular in this day and age, where you want to just fall victim to trolls or react to a trailer and, oh, I've seen the movie. I'm like, no, you haven't seen the movie. You've seen a trailer. I do think Gabriel Lorca's storyline, the first captain they had, played by Jason Isaacs, it kind of felt like, my main complaint is his character just, when they do away with him after season 1, it kind of just felt like, I mean, you always kind of felt like his character was kind of going downhill and going to meet some kind of tragic or awful end. I kind of felt like he essentially at first kind of took a while to kind of develop the character. I know he wanted kind of more of a Southern thing, but all I mainly just saw was he just kind of was his turn to kind of do his take on Captain Kirk or Picard. And I just felt like his character didn't really isn't all that consequential to the rest of the storyline. Because I mean, Burnham is the main heroine, and all the other guys are helping her out, and he's just kind of just the guy telling everyone where to pilot the ship, and he's just war hungry. And I just kind of felt like he's kind of more of a plot device than a good, well thought out character. But
I've been thinking recently, like, how instrumental do they need to make like Michael, like all through the series? Basically, it seems like integral to the plot and all that. I said to my dad, like, why does she need to be Space Jesus, basically?
Yeah.
In the first season, she's like, they need her to be some sort of go-between between like Navarre and the Federation. I'm like,
although that's
why?
what was so annoying is there were some people who were like total alt-right, and these are the kind of trolls who like to claim everything is woke or too politically correct. And it's just like, you guys, you're gonna act like there's not enough religious movies when Star Trek always gets religious. And here you go, you got basically a messiah. And you got your Neo in the Matrix, and it's not good enough for you. I think the show just is going to keep getting better. So who's the main writer of it now? I know Brian Fuller of Pushing Daisies and Dead Like Me and Hannibal fame. He had worked on Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and then he kind of worked on this and kind of left after like season 1.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of fans don't realize like the change of Klingons and stuff like that. That was there were actually things that he wanted to have happen, and he planned the show as like an anthology series. Like each season would be like somewhere and somewhere different, a bit like they've done with short tracks, I guess, but seasonal changes rather than episodic.
I do gotta say, I was kind of disappointed by the short tracks, and I get it. They're an in-between thing to kind of, get you ready for the next episode the following week. And some of them were very intriguing, but some of them I just felt like were too restricted by the short film formula. But
it seemed like I looked back at the start of it. It seemed like they started up that when they were still needing to work on. I can't remember which season of Discovery it was, but it was one particular season when they were having to like finish off the visual effects for that season of Discovery. So they thought like this is going to take so long. Like we need to keep, satisfying the fans' appetites for a new track, basically. So that's how short tracks came about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and you get more good casting. We got to talk about Rainn Wilson.
Because I guess if you're talking about prequels, well, you're saying like Enterprise and Discovery, of course, they're prequels, but also like I would think like the vast majority, or certainly, a lot of the episodes of short tracks also are prequels to like the original series and the other shows.
Mm-hmm. Totally. It's like a prequel spin-off / but it's an actual like origin story as opposed to just like kind of the infamous way of saying it where it's like a reboot and everything. So what's your take on Harry Mudd? We needed more of him. He's like a classic original series 1, and here he's portrayed by The Offices and Galaxy Quest. Rainn Wilson.
Rainn Wilson, yeah. I thought he was interesting to watch and everything, but I was like, how do you get from this to like the Harry Mudd that's in the original series? Couldn't quite make the connection, I thought.
Yeah, he plays his character way differently, but at the same time, there's like a bunch of Easter eggs for like longtime Trek fans. So I mean,
definitely, yeah.
This is where I give it a little more credibility than most reboots and prequels, because I mean, in many ways, there's something for everybody. It is trying to be very organized and attention-getting, and it seems like, I don't know, we just have a lot of people who, I don't know, just seem to just think that Trek is just a prequel show, and it's like, yeah, no, or a military show. Sorry, it's like, no, Trek that's not what Trek is.
Actually, that was one of the things like my dad was saying, because I've been watching Discovery with my dad a lot, and he was saying like the amount of hugging and crying and emotionality and stuff that's in Discovery, like there's no way you would get that in the military. But as I was saying to him, well, Starfleet isn't, it's not supposed to be an entire military organization.
Never. I never thought of it that way. I always thought of it as explorers who happen to have guns, just like any other conquistador,
Yeah, so I think it's appropriate how they behave.
Yeah, and it just seems like, I don't know, it seems like a lot of these people who just never followed or paid perfect attention to Trek were just so blown away. Oh, we're talking about war crimes. We're talking about, marriage between forbidden cultures. Oh, 2 characters are gay. It's like, yeah, we've been hinting that literally you're going to detect all of that. There's plenty of moments where someone, hits on another character, and it's just like, man, you guys have clearly just not been paying attention to anything.
But also, like, I was thinking just now, like, surely, like, NASA and stuff like that, like, there's part of the, modern, real, like, space exploration stuff is an outgrowth or whatever of the military in a way. But then the other day, like, I saw like a news story saying like they were allowing enabling like physically disabled people to go into space, and I thought that like that's brilliant. That's like that's the start of, seems to me like that's like the start of them allowing like more civilian flights and stuff like that. Like, there's been talk about like hotels in space, and William Shatner going up again. He's an actor, an extremely rich one, but he's not in the military. He's not
right. To learn
he's not
to become
trained as a pilot or anything. Yeah.
Oh, totally. It's so wild. And I mean, if people are going to complain about how the characters portray their sex lives, then I mean, you might as well complain about how people get zapped and incinerated by phasers in this. This is like, it was never a problem for anyone else when people would bleed in a fight. I mean, Spock bled on the original show, for God's sakes, but it was green, so I guess so, it wasn't violent. But this is like, everyone else almost always had some scars in their head or got in a fight, and there's no difference on here. I mean, Enterprise even had a partially bloody explosion, not graphic enough, too graphic to be on TV, but you know what I mean. And I don't know, it seems like everybody just has to just have a complaint with something.
Yeah, but I think it was a continuation of representation to a certain extent, isn't it, with like LGBTQ.
How dare we have equal rights for everyone?
Well, I was thinking also to myself, absolutely, I don't have a problem with it. However, like, I would maybe admit that with the character of Adira introduced in season 3, when they started speaking about how they preferred to go by the pronoun they and their, I found that a bit confusing in the dialogue initially, because the scene after that, they start talking about like they and their, and I'm like, who are they speaking about? I didn't quite get it at first, and I was like, they're talking about Adira.
Yeah, that could have been better worded, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, Trek is a representation of earlier stuff, centuries later, and
yeah,
I don't know, people always find a problem with something. I'm not seeing the main problem unless you just pretty much hate equal rights for everybody. But in all fairness, I don't think it's heavy-handed or anything. I do think it could be a little more, if I'm going to have any complaint, it's that it could have been a little more organized and less of the mirror universe stuff. But at the same time, I mean, I think of this as more just complimentary, to all the other stuff we've seen. So
yeah,
it is what it is.
That's what I was thinking. Like, when fans were complaining that internationally Discovery wasn't available, there's a whole outcry about that. And I was thinking, like, we've had like 55 plus years of Star Trek. Like, surely anything extra would be like the icing on the cake. You're
and
like,
don't you
clearly enjoy everything that's come before?
Right. And don't you love how everyone wants to focus on just the negative type in the media stuff instead of actually focus on, is like, or are they real actual Star Trek fans, or are they just casual viewers who hate anything progressive, or let alone just don't like sci-fi and they don't like to be reminded of. Okay, so here's a valid point. If you are one of those who just hate something that you're reminded of, that reminds you of the real world, I mean, then just don't watch Star Trek in general. There's always going to be something in there, and just because you didn't pick up on it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just kind of like, come on. I mean, there's always some social commentary, and it's not like you're talking about something just so controversial like that no one can ever agree on. It's like, no, all it's doing is just having various people in the future, and just because there were two men who kissed on one scene, everyone's like just freaking out. And it's like, well, I know what side of the spectrum you are. Is like, you guys need to just stop. Just stop freaking out on something that you know exists.
Yeah. Well, there were fans getting annoyed with me because I was saying like I wasn't particularly keen on the suggestion of a relationship between Detmer and Owo or Washington, both of whom were like the forward stations on the bridge of Discovery. But I was like, well, I'm not that keen on Janeway or Chakotay either. Like, you can still be, you can still have your opinion of this relationship you think is working, between characters or not. It's not necessarily, obviously, an indication that, oh, I must be homophobic. That's what people were saying. And I'm like, no, I just don't. I'm not that keen on that particular relationship.
I know. It's just like it. There's never gonna be a character who you are 100% on. I think I respect, and I'm also not close to Cisco. I also applaud for how he keeps the station in line. Would I go about it differently? Sure, but it's not for me to decide because this is a work of fiction, and people getting all worked up. I mean, relax. Yeah. It's like, but yeah, no, I know what you mean. It is kind of interesting just seeing how just toxic fans can try it. It's like, take your toxicity to other fandoms. Don't take it to Star Trek. And if you don't like something, move along. You don't have to like it.
Yeah, like I said to someone as well recently, I think there's like a vast difference between like having like a considered critical opinion about something or that sort of thing, and just trolling, basically.
Very trolling. And I mean, everyone's introduced to different things at different intervals. So I mean, when I was introduced to Trek, I mean, what I see, is kind of what you first see a character on determines on how they make an impression upon you. So, for instance, I saw some of the later seasons of Voyager, so I didn't think Chakotay or Harry Kim were all that interesting as I've seen the actors in other roles. And it's like, well, truth be told, that's because they were spending less attention on them. So yeah, everyone already knew everything about us. And Rick Berman wasn't a fan of the Harry Kim characters. We found out years later, and same thing. Well, not the same thing, but similar with Chakotay, where he just took a back seat. So it's just like, well, okay, so see the other seasons where they are developed and just appreciate those. But I mean, you could say the same thing about any character. Like in the first season, Troy and Worf are just very secondary before we later love how they become a key part of the storylines in later seasons. And same thing with season 1. Like even Ira Stephen Barr admitted, is like, I didn't know what to do with Bashir except have him be just a sleazeball, just jokester. And even the actors, like, I didn't really know what to do with the character, so I just had fun with it. So it's like everything can evolve later on, and I think it definitely evolves.
Yeah, and it seems also to me like I guess like someone said this to me recently as a general thing, but I guess it applies to Star Trek too. Is that like people oftentimes will post things on social media and stuff like that like they would never say in real life.
I know that they just feel like they can hide behind that, and it's like, no, don't be a chicken shit. If you are going to be an asshole, you come out here, full fold.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really is amazing how just so many will just act like, I'm on the internet, so therefore I don't have to be held accountable. I'm like, yes, you do. You're being a jerk.
Do you think there's been like less sort of fan complaints or whatever, more or less about Discovery or Enterprise?
I think for the longest time, Enterprise was the punching bag, but again, it was just people who stopped watching after a while. They didn't see. I always had some kind of respect for it, even though each time I would watch it and kind of get disappointed. But I'm still, I revisit everything, and there's always going to be an episode of every show where you're like, I'm just not keen on it. I'm not crazy about it. But I respect it because of the material it's dealing with, and it's doing something way better than any of us could possibly ever do. And some of them you're going to want to end up rewatching anyway. So yeah, I mean, it was very intriguing to see just how them evolved. And I think, Enterprise has just kind of been, it always had some kind of fan base thanks to the last 2 seasons. And much like Voyager, and it was just constantly just syndicated and re-aired. So it had kind of a life to just kind of be appreciated. And I mean, there's a reason when it got on Netflix and people started embracing it there and campaigned for a season 5. So I think the fandom is very alive with that one. Now with Discovery, it's seen a lot of that same thing too. There were a lot of people who, much like they saw it just because it looked very much like the Abrams movies. It's got a lot of it's not as crazy with the lens flares, but a similar visual style. And there's a lot of people who were defending it. They're like, this is the first track I've ever seen. I really dig this. This is blowing my mind. I'm like, so I there's no not denying that appeal is like, okay, that says a lot when you can. This is why we like about Star Trek. I've seen many minorities who admitted like the only track they ever saw was Deep Space Nine. It's like the first black captain to have a show, and same thing with Voyager. It was like first woman to have a show, but they went beyond just the gimmick of the, of also just their storylines were very different and very appealing to various people. It's like you look at Deep Space Nine now, and it's dealing with topics that even rivals show Babylon 5 didn't want to deal with, like war-torn countries, and but with the space symbolism. And Voyager, to its credit, it didn't have to be 7 seasons, but they still pretty much had a huge modus operandi, which is, okay, so we're just going to have, we can only go to a planet so many times without getting old, so we're going to just have a bunch of experimentation with the holodeck and other science stuff. And it's like people find ways to be creative after a while, regardless of whether it's where you want it to go. But yeah, I mean, it's very intriguing how these shows are just still just kind of rounding up and finding material that stands out. And yeah, I think the one everyone's kind of kinder to might be Enterprise. And Discovery, I think it's going to keep evolving some way, shape, or form. It's definitely I prefer Picard, but that's just because I'm biased, because I'm rediscovering all the characters I've grown to love and can't wait for another gritty adventure. And I think they're just going to find a way to surprise us, even if how it sets up with Kugan involved isn't hard to predict. There's still going to be something in there which is pretty deep. Like, I think they've already had anytime they were dealing with Data, they always had a chance to have very intelligent, cyberpunkish kind of robotic intrigue, kind of like Blade Runner and Terminator. I think with that one, they're going to keep just finding another way for dealing with, immortality and what the title character wants to go out on a high note on. And I don't know if that'll go 7 seasons. I can't see it going too many seasons because, Patrick Stewart is getting up there. I think Discovery is going to kind of be a good counterbalance of, okay, so, and I mean, people are saying there's never going to not be enough Star Trek. So pretty much, we've seen all the fan films and all this other stuff. And now, we got Lower Decks, which is just kind of a spoof kind of Trek show that still somewhat adds up with the chronologic stuff. And then, Prodigy, which is kind of a Voyager continuations in animated form. So it's like, there's always going to be something for everybody. And I think, if anything, Discovery is going to keep improving to some deal. But if you don't like it, you don't like it. But
Yeah.
Anyone who's just doing the whole, I hate all these social themes, is like, I'm sorry, you just hated anything that was positive.
So,
it's really
regarding
not
regarding the prequel sort of idea, well, you've already mentioned like Strange New Worlds, which certainly looks like it will be
Section 31, which is like dealing with like kind of the Maquis, I guess, just kind of a security system.
So I wondered if you thought, like, do you think there's room for like another prequel show?
Sure, why not? I mean, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be before all of this and that. I mean, it could be if you wanted to do, hell, if you even wanted to do like a continuation show, people would jump on that. If you wanted to show what Deep Space Nine is like now, if you wanted to show some other pre-next gen saga, go for it, and like you say, there's going to be people who are just very crude and just don't give it a chance, but those who are just very patient and want to have fun with everything will eventually just say, okay, well, I accept it as its own entity, in its own right. So Trek is very civilized for those who give it the benefit of the doubt. Those who decide to kind of be crude and mean, already probably aren't the right fit for this anyway. So I mean, I think the saga is just going to keep being unpredictable, and that's what it's always had on its side.
Yeah. I was thinking just now how like Lower Decks technically, I guess, is a prequel to Picard. In a way, just happening before it.
In a way, it pretty much is. If I had any other prediction, I mean, I'm sure they might even get into other different kinds of cartoons. It's just so wild how it's coming out around the same time as Star Wars.
Yeah.
And yet it really isn't taking any inspiration from Star Wars because it's good. It's like, I think that's where the franchise got a little chaotic, was when it was trying too hard to be, because like when Enterprise started out, it did kind of have a lot of similar Star Wars kind of battles, and you saw that in the reboot movies, and slowly it dialed it back. It's like, let's be like actual, Star Trek, where we're thinking out, thinking men's adventure pictures,
So I was thinking maybe they could have like something like set after the Third World War, and like the people still like believing in trying to improve their culture and their society, where it would still be the same ideals as they're heading towards the Federation.
That would be cool if you had like some kind of like farming community, show what a Trek planet is for elongated thing, is like no time traveling. Like, still very like primitive societies.
Even maybe something like the Novans, like they have to establish a planet, like an Enterprise, and head off from Earth.
That could totally work. You could essentially, for better or worse, just kind of, you could maybe, I guess, just show what it's like to live there. We've always gotten a hint, but like, how is it actually being on a planet and dealing with it all?
So I was thinking, like, how do you keep like the focus of that they're heading towards the ideals of the Federation, the Starfleet, but also like including like conflict and that sort of thing and jeopardy. Well, maybe you could have something like that, but with like Nausicaan pirates or whatever attacking every so often, that sort of thing. They're still like struggling, but like they're still heading towards their Roddenberry's ideals of future humans, basically.
That would be cool. Future humanity would be an interesting leap in that you basically would essentially just show, just go back to the kind of the feel good of Trek, where essentially saying, after I've accomplished what I want in this lifetime, what do I go from there? And I mean, that's just a good storytelling from any aspect when you want to showcase how just everyone just keeps evolving, keeps challenging themselves, and when they've done it all, what do they stand for? And I meant to actually ask you this. So, do you consider the Kelvin storyline in Abrams' universe somewhat canon? Because I mean, it's a mirror universe to be kind of fair, but it is kind of wild how they mention Archer as a president in that.
Well, I go with the definition of canon that's on Memory Alpha, which is basically anything on screen. It's considered canon.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, no, it's interesting. More or less, I think it's even funnier how the actual first Enterprise is like one of the spaceship models seen in Into Darkness. So it's definitely somewhere in that universe. That's an alternate timeline. So I'm just like, okay, it is what it is. It's not deep Star Trek, but there's some entertainment in there somewhere. But I prefer these more than the movies, the reboot movies, because I mean, this is still kind of going back to just the main appeal of thinking man's kind of standpoint, and I still got to give them a huge applause for just being their own entity. I think Discovery is slowly becoming its own thing. It hasn't happened as fast as everyone would like, but Enterprise definitely knew what it wanted to do. It just didn't do it well the first few years, and then slowly just realized, okay, we're about to be canceled, so let's actually reorganize our staff.
But then again, I did think when we were discussing it, and you were talking about things like the transporter that didn't really get flashed out as like a working thing basically until like later in the series, and I thought I think that they did like better with that sort of thing than like Voyager. The hardship of being in a completely different quadrant and surviving, because I think Ron D. Moore, who you mentioned, he worked on Voyager. He got frustrated with that sort of aspect, like that they weren't including as much of that as they could have, and like that's what like really inspired him, I think, to go on to do the Battlestar Galactica reboot.
Yes, he did. Yeah. And he and Brandon Braga had a misunderstanding. He thought he was part of the main writing staff, and Rick Berman was just he really wasn't telling them anything up front, and they were just so honored to be used. And so I think it's in definitely better producer hands. I know some people like to hate on Alex Kurtzman because they didn't like his work on other movies and shows with Abrams. And it's like, in all fairness, I think he's come a long way, because I think he found, after basically being made Tom Cruise's bitch on the set of that awful Mummy film, I think he just realizes if you're going to be mad at anyone on the new Trek ones, be mad at Abrams, be mad at even Roberto Orsi, who got into, just very verbal with fans saying, fuck you. And it's just like, please remember, they're all fanboys and they just needed to vent and they didn't need to go there. But if you didn't like Orsi, I understand. I don't understand the hatred of Kurtzman, because he's just always been kind of a tag-along kind of writer. I have no problem with, what's his name? Akiva Goldsman. And the other gal they brought on for both Discovery and Picard, was doing a lot of the books. And she seems very just laid back and just very cool. And
Kristen Byer.
That's her. Yeah. And I don't know, Akiva Goldsman, it seems like some people just always had him on the shit list when they don't seem to realize that when you are a screenwriter, there's always going to be multiple rewrites. So he's popular for the Ron Howard stuff and the good Joel Schumacher movies, and then he's infamous for the bad Joel Schumacher movies. So it's like, he's just been doing a lot of producing and co-writing with a bunch of other projects. And I don't know, I think a lot of people, they don't understand how scripts go. They just assume because you are credited, you are the one responsible for something that I don't like. And it's just like, so many things go for multiple rewrites. And sometimes, in all fairness, the Writers Guild is really full of it when they will credit someone even though there are multiple rewriters.
Oh yeah.
And
like recently, I watched the the films Genesis 2 and Planet Earth that Gene Roddenberry had done, and it
Yeah.
seemed like looking up like the behind the scenes information on Wikipedia, it seemed like certainly Roddenberry intended for those to be in like the same continuity as the original Star Trek, but I thought it was really fascinating to read that. Even though they're not called obviously Star Trek themselves, I thought it's still really interesting.
Oh yeah, a lot of Roddenberry's early stuff is totally worth seeing, because you're like, I can see how this, inspired him to make this.
He went on to do that though after like the original Star Trek, like Genesis 2 and Planet Earth. He did both of those in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're unsold TV pilots, and they just kind of keep getting rediscovered. I'm surprised they're not as popular on the YouTube generation, but I'm with you. It's very interesting how we got all this material, and I think it's just going to keep getting eaten up in some aspect. I think it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like with, like you say, people who just never followed or gave any other Star Trek the time of day. Is like, they don't like it. That's on them. I mean, but those who do embrace everything, I mean, there is something to gain. And I think Discovery will keep improving eventually. And what we do have is still solid. It's just not 100%, but it's not awful. And so, I think Enterprise is the better of these two, but I don't know. Just be careful of who you meet on the internet. It's like, who is just radical, fascist, hate speech, pushing, and who legit just found it preachy or melodramatic. So you got that to think about. And this has been fun just visiting these both with you. Do you have anything you would like to promote?
Well, after working on Memory Alpha basically for years and years, I've basically gone on to create another website, Star Trek related website called WarpFactorTrek's. And likewise, like there are multiple writers for that, and really been enjoying like editing the articles that are submitted for the site and stuff like that. And also been like hosting my own YouTube channel and podcast on there called The Scotch Tracker, where we've been interviewing like cast and crew from Star Trek. So the most recent one was on the anniversary of Star Trek 6: Undiscovered Country, and we spoke to Nicholas Meyer and really quite a few cast and crew members from that film. It was really a lot of fun.
That had to be fun. I mean, it's Nicholas Meyer,
Yeah.
Very outside of track, just a very proficient script writer, and man, that's cool. I will check out more of that. And anything else you want to just promote?
No, well, that's it. Well, apart from like we're present on Twitter, on Facebook, Facebook group and Facebook page for both the Scotch Tracker and WarpFactorTrek.com.
Sweet. Okay. Well, you heard it from him.
Thanks.
Thank you. This was a delight.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try...
They must be destroyed on sight!
The new Podcast Cure-All, sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of...
They must be destroyed on sight!
As needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be a
did you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our queue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-last plot holes of gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy.
At eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zamenhof. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zamenhof, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zamenhof, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zamenhof.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The two lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VDClinicPod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VDClinicPod. Or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
Hi there. It's Heather from the Watching Netflix Without You podcast. Did you know that there are over 1,200 Netflix original feature films and documentaries? And that number is only growing. So I've made it my mission to watch as many as I possibly can. Then, with a delightful guest or guests, disclaimer, more often than not my brother Ryan, we spend an episode rating, reviewing, and discussing a film at length. The first half of every episode is spoiler-free for those who haven't seen it yet, and in the second half, after a very clear spoiler warning, we dive into it. And that's really about it. You can listen to Watching Netflix Without You on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more.
We now continue with our program.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a